Welcome back, folks. Dave Scott, joined by Randy Helmo, Boomer Music Experience, another Hub Media podcast. But this time, Randy and I are taking a look. This is a special edition. We're taking a look at the life of MeatLoaf. Recently, he passed away, and both Randy and I are such big fans. We felt it was important to do a little tribute, spend a few minutes, its own little separate show, and talk about MeatLoaf and the impact that his music had. Randy as a DJ, me as a youngster growing up. Randy, it's great to see you, and thanks for taking the time to do this show.
Thanks very much, Dave. Really looking forward to it. It's certainly an action-packed show again, and I'm very, very pleased to be working with you on it. In our last show, Dave, we had mentioned Fat Larry's band, and I just, for the life of me, I couldn't remember Fat Larry's band. So what I did some quick research on it, and I'd like to share that with our audience just before we get into the tribute to MeatLoaf. Fat Larry's band was an American R&B and funk band from Philadelphia, and they enjoyed some commercial success in the late 70s and the early 80s. And this came not so much in the United States and Canada, but in the United Kingdom. That's where they really achieved success, in the UK. Now, as I'd mentioned, their genres kind of transbordered R&B and funk music. Fat Larry's band, they had a really, really good band, good drummer, good vocalists, and two of their biggest hits were Act Like You Know and Zoom. Well, Zoom today, Zoom.com, how appropriate. However, we're back into the early 80s here. So Zoom, it reached number 2 on the UK singles chart, and that was in October of 1982. So, they had a couple of hits. On December the 5th, 1987, James, he passed away of a heart attack at only 38 years young. And as a result of that, Fat Larry's band folded. But here again, they had some commercial success, but most of their success in the late 70s and early 80s was in the United Kingdom and not here in North America.
And for the folks that don't know what Randy and I are referring to on our February Valentine's Day show, that name came up as one of the bands that had created sort of a Valentine's Day themed song, and it had done really well in the UK. It made it a top 10 list, wasn't it, Randy? And Randy and I both Randy and I had never heard of the band, folks. So we wanted to look into it to share that information with you. And I forgot about it. Thanks for doing the research on that, Randy. I really appreciate that.
Oh, no problem, Dave. No problem.
All right.
MeatLoaf.
I think we should definitely get into some of the history of MeatLoaf now. And I know you've got a full background, so I'll let you take the mic and away you go, buddy.
Okay. Thanks very much, Dave. MeatLoaf was born Marvin Lee Aday on September the 27th, 1947. And of course, professionally, he was known as MeatLoaf. He was an American singer, but he was also an established actor too. So singing and acting were his two major fortes. And he is on the list of the best-selling music artists. Of course, his Bat Out of Hell trilogy. That's Bat Out of Hell, the original album. Then Bat Out of Hell 2, Back Into Hell, number 3. And, of course, Bat Out of Hell 3, The Monster Is Loose. That was recorded in 2006. The original in 1977. And the Bat Out of Hell 2, 1993. So here we're traversing the decades. And the trilogy, these Bat Out of Hell albums, this is interesting. They have sold more than 65 million albums worldwide. Let me repeat that.
Yeah.
They have sold more than 65 million albums worldwide. Wow.
Bad
Go
Out of
ahead, Dave.
Hell. Bad Out of Hell itself has sold what 47 million. Isn't it the number 3 all time as far as records sold? Which
That
is
is
incredible.
absolutely correct.
I thought I'd read that before the show, and
Hmm.
I couldn't even when I read that I was just like trying to put that in perspective, and you can't that many albums for that for 1977. I mean, I think I had read that it still had sold up to close to 200,000 a year before MeatLoaf passed away, and that's incredible. That is
Oh,
just
yeah.
phenomenal.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
Dave. And of course,
So,
after the commercial success of Bat Out of Hell, the original, and Bat Out of Hell 2, Back into Hell, it earned a Grammy Award for the Best Solo Rock Vocal Performance for the song called I'd Do Anything for Love. And that's a great song, too.
yeah, yeah.
But MeatLoaf, looking at MeatLoaf now, the key to his success really was his popularity in Europe, especially in Great Britain and Ireland.
Oh, wow.
And in 1994, MeatLoaf received the Brit Award in the United Kingdom for the best-selling album and single. Now, he appeared in the 1997 film Spice World, and he ranked 23 for the number of weeks spent on the UK charts, and this was only back in 2006. Now, in the VH1's 100 Greatest Artists of Hard Rock, MeatLoaf ranks number 96.
Okay.
Now, a day, he appeared in over 50 films and television shows, and his film roles include Eddie, I remember this, Eddie in the Rocky Horror Picture Show back in 1975, and he portrayed the character Bob Paulson in Fight Club in 1999.
In Fight Club, yeah. In Fight Club, you're right. Yeah.
That's interesting. And once again, MeatLoaf, his music genres, Dave, to share with our audience, would include rock, basic rock, hard rock, and heavy metal. Those were the 3 basic music genres that MeatLoaf specialized in. Let's take a look at his early life. Marvin Lee Aday, he was born in Dallas, Texas on September 27th, 1947. He was the only child of Wilma and Artie. Wilma was a school teacher, and she was also a member of the Gospel Music Quartet. And MeatLoaf's father, Orvis, he was a former police officer who then went into business selling a homemade cough remedy with his wife and a friend under the name of the Griffin Grocery Company. Now, MeatLoaf stated in an interview that when he was born, he was bright red and stayed that way for days. And to his father said he looked like 9 pounds of ground chuck. Jeez, that's a nice compliment for your son. Oh boy, I'll tell you. So he was later called ML, that was put on the hospital bedside. And then in reference to those initials, his weight increased. And in the 7th grade, when he was in grade 7, all of his schoolmates referred to him as MeatLoaf. Okay, and why was this? Well, he was only 5 foot 2 inches and weighed 240 pounds. And also, the name MeatLoaf, this is interesting too, attributed the name MeatLoaf. He stepped on a football coach's foot, and the coach yelled out, "Get off my foot, you hunk of meatloaf." Hence, the name MeatLoaf. That's interesting how that came about in the different areas in his younger life.
For sure.
Unfortunately, his father was an alcoholic. He went on drinking binges for days at a time, And this started when he was medically discharged from the U.S. Army during World War II after being wounded by fragments of mortar shell. So what would happen? MeatLoaf and his mom, they would tour all the bars in Dallas, Texas, looking for the father. And, they'd find him in this bar or that bar. Really kind of a frustrating picture. But on a more positive note, MeatLoaf attended church and Bible study every Sunday with his mom. When he was 16, on the day of the assassination of President John F. Kennedy, MeatLoaf had met President Kennedy when he arrived at Dallas's Love Field, stepping off the aircraft, Air Force One. After hearing about the assassination, MeatLoaf and a friend, they drove to Parkland Hospital, and they weren't too far from Parkland Hospital, where he saw Jacqueline Kennedy getting out of the Lincoln car there. In 1965, Aday graduated from the Thomas Jefferson High School, having appeared in, here again, school stage productions of Where's Charlie?, The Music Man, and he also played football on the university football team as a defensive tackle. So here again, we see him in the acting stages. We see him as a football player. And in 1967, when MeatLoaf was 19 years young, his mother died from cancer. And that was very, very sad because he was so close to his mother. He was not impressed with his father's binge drinking. Of course, that had to be hard too. So what he did from his mother's inheritance, he rented an apartment in Dallas, Texas. And a short time after that, he caught a flight to Los Angeles. Now, he intentionally gained, while he was in Los Angeles, he intentionally gained 60 pounds to fail his physical examination for the Vietnam War draft. Wow.
Poor guy.
Yeah. In his early career in Los Angeles, Aday formed his first band, which was entitled MeatLoaf Soul. And the band received several recording contracts, and their first gig was in Huntington Beach, California. The year was 1968, and it took place at The Cave. And The Cave, he opened for acts like Van Morrison. Like, how good is that?
Really? I didn't know
The theme, cool. The band Them, the band Question Mark, and the Mysterians. These are all big bands during that time. And later, MeatLoaf defined his early days in the music industry. He was being treated as like a circus clown. Nobody in the music world at that time frame really took him seriously as an accomplished and an established artist in rock. Unbelievable. The band underwent several changes. After changing the name, they had all kinds of different names, but MeatLoaf, that was the official name. And of course, they opened for various acts in Los Angeles. Of course, Los Angeles was huge for the various rock groups. They opened for, again, groups like The Who, Grateful Dead, the Grease Band, and some other notable acts. Let's take a look at the 1970s. With the publicity generated from Hair, MeatLoaf, he accepted an invitation by, listen to this, by Motown in Detroit. Motown in Detroit?
I did read this. Yeah, it's pretty
an
cool.
Invitation? Boy, when you get an invitation from Motown in Detroit, you're in like Flint. So they wanted him to record only the vocals with fellow Hair performer Sean Stoney Murphy on an album of songs which were written and selected by the Motown production team. How good is that? Wow. Man, oh man. So Meatloaf and Stoney, they toured with various groups like the Soul Searchers. They opened for Richie Havens. They opened for The Who, Bob Seger, Alice Cooper, and Rare Earth, just to mention a few. So you can see, being in Los Angeles proved to be the right move, because he was opening for all these major acts that were just top of the line in that decade. Very, very interesting. And I truly believe moving to Los Angeles at that time frame in his life and his musical career was the thing to do. Wouldn't you agree, Dave?
Yeah, I agree. And you get the feeling that he's putting in that 10,000 hours, to become that quality musician and actor that he wants to be. You can definitely see how those years in LA probably help establish who he wanted to be and put him in the right direction for down the road when him and Steinman meet, I think later on in New York. But isn't it amazing the process that these guys go through to get to that point, right? Like you said, Motown calls. You're opening for The Who, you're opening for Van. I mean, that's incredible. And a lot of this story that you're providing, a lot of folks don't know. And it's really interesting to see how his beginnings were. Continue, Randy.
Exactly. In December of 1972, Meatloaf was in the original off-Broadway production of Rainbow, and that was at the Orpheum Theater in New York. After the tour, Meatloaf rejoined the cast of Hair, and Hair was a huge musical success, not only in the Broadway theater, but also off-Broadway too. And he auditioned for the Public Theater's production of More Than You Deserve. It was during this audition that Meatloaf met Jim Steinman. Now, we must remember this name, Jim Steinman. He was the key catalyst for the success of Meatloaf in North America. Jim Steinman. And he sang a Stoney and Meatloaf favorite, I'd Love to Be as Heavy as Jesus. Wow, that's interesting. In late 1973, Meatloaf was cast in the original LA Roxy cast of the Rocky Horror Show, and he played parts of Eddie and Dr. Everett Scott in that musical. Now, about the same time, Meatloaf and Steinman, they started work on Bat Out of Hell. And Meatloaf convinced Epic Records, and of course at that time, these record companies, Epic was one of the biggest record companies in the United States. And so anyway, they recorded 4 music videos, Bat Out of Hell, Paradise by the Dashboard Light, You Took the Words Right Out of My Mouth, and 2 out of 3 Ain't Bad. And they convinced Lou Adler, who is the top dog at Epic Records, to produce these sound videos. Well, as we know, you might say the rest is history. In 1976, Meatloaf recorded lead vocals for Ted Nugent's album, Free for All. Ted Nugent, he was more a really hard rock to acid rock artist, and he had a lot of excellent hits too. Meatloaf and Steinman started working on Bat Out of Hell in 1972, but they didn't really get serious about it until the end of 1974. So Meatloaf then decided he was going to leave the theater and concentrate exclusively on his music. Good choice. Good choice. Meatloaf was cast in an understudy for John Belushi in the National Lampoon show Lemmings. And it was at the Lampoon show that Meatloaf met Ellen Foley. And she was the co-star who sang Paradise by the Dashboard Light and Bat Out of Hell with him on the album Bat Out of Hell. How good is that? And Ellen Foley in her own right was an excellent female singer. So as you can see, this Bat Out of Hell was a major focal point for the success of future Bat Out of Hell albums. But to get the first one started, huge success for him.
Yeah, and
I think, Dave,
it took them a
Bat
lot.
Out of Hell, it was the beginning of a pinnacle for MeatLoaf of music. Wouldn't you agree?
I totally agree. And I think it took them, they went through, as you're going to get to right now, I'm sure they went through a ton of record companies trying to get somebody to take it on. And it had more of a musical flavor originally. And then they come across someone else who's going to help them out, don't they, Randy?
Absolutely. Yeah.
All right.
Absolutely. So, as I had mentioned earlier, they were having a most difficult time. They had to shop around the world to get a record company that would take a chance on them to release the first album, Bat Out of Hell. And this was October of 1977. Well, finally, Cleveland Records took a chance.
Yeah.
They picked them up.
Small little record company.
Yeah. And MeatLoaf and Jim Steinman, they formed the band Neverland Express to tour in support of Bat Out of Hell. So their first gig was opening for Cheap Trick in Chicago. Of course, Cheap Trick, great rock band.
Yeah.
So they opened for them. And they also, MeatLoaf gained national exposure as the musical guest on Saturday Night Live on March 25th, 1978. Yeah. And here's something, Dave, I need to share with our audience, and I never knew this. When MeatLoaf was performing in Ottawa, Ontario, Canada, he fell off the stage. Whoa! And he broke his leg. And what he did, he finished his tour performing in a wheelchair.
Oh,
now,
goodness.
Talk about dedication. How good is that? Hokey Dinah.
Hey, Randy, do you know one of the reasons why a lot of record companies wouldn't take Bat Out of Hell? I read this and I thought it was kind of interesting.
Yeah, no, please share, Dave.
Well, MeatLoaf, like you said, was a bigger fella, and they just didn't think he was the right image for a rock band. So they were kind of turning him down based on what he looked like. They weren't really hearing what he had to say. And I thought, that's too bad that they looked at it that way, because their loss was Cleveland Records' gain, really, which was nice to see that somebody took that chance on MeatLoaf. But society, again, even back then, was looking at people, looking how, he wasn't the beauty that they wanted. Let's just say that. But boy, did he prove them wrong. And one of the things that I also read about the Bat Out of Hell album, and it was a quote from MeatLoaf himself. He said, when he sang those songs, when him and Steinman got together and he did those songs, he wasn't just performing them. He became part of the song. And he said every night when he went on stage, he would become part of that music. And I think his incredible voice, that truly came through. Didn't you think that as well, Randy?
Oh, very true, Dave. Absolutely. Yeah, he put his heart and soul into each song, and you could hear that coming out through his voice in the songs that he played to the various crowds.
Yeah.
Very unique.
Yeah, it was. And it was almost, Bat Out of Hell, looking at that album too, if we can for a second, it is almost a musical. It really is. But it draws you in, doesn't it? Every song has a story, and it's going somewhere. It
certainly does.
So I think you get, a lot of great musicians are able to do that, but I think with MeatLoaf's passion and Steinman's rating and great backup singers, it just took off. It just, and they said after the Saturday Night Live show, that's when the album really exploded. It sort of been, knuckling along there for the first 6 months, and then you go on SNL and all hell breaks loose, and all of a sudden it's you become, I believe MeatLoaf said after that, it was like you had to be, at the top of your game. You were at 11 all the time from that point on, because it just exploded. And Yeah, I got to look for some footage on that because I'm trying to remember if I saw that SNL.
Right on. Yeah.
But oh
Well,
well.
when you get on Saturday Night Live, here again, that is huge. That is
Yeah.
humongous because
It,
everybody knows Saturday Night Live,
yeah.
and of
Yeah, and
course,
then even back then it was massive. Hey, quick
yes.
question for you though. With Bat
Yeah.
Out of Hell, being a DJ for as long as you have,
Mhm.
when the first time you heard this album, what did you think? I mean, you were probably doing a little bit of DJing back then. You were probably, I know that you were when you were in high school and all that, and
Mhm.
you're such a
Right on.
music aficionado. What did you think? What was your first impression? You tell me yours, and I'll tell you mine.
When I first heard the album Bat Out of Hell by MeatLoaf, Dave, I studied each of those songs. I listened very intently. And after I was finished doing that, God, I want to listen to these songs again. It was like a magnet drawing you in to Meatloaf's life's experiences. And as you mentioned earlier, he put his heart and soul into each and every song he recorded. And this is truly, Bat Out of Hell is truly a masterpiece for the times. Wouldn't you agree, Dave?
Can't argue with that. I think when you're saying that, I remember the first time I heard it, I was at a friend's house. I think I was 14, 15 years old. And I just remember thinking after I heard it, similar to you, after the first time I heard it, I was kind of stunned. I was like, and pardon my English, what the hell was that? You know what I mean? Like, what did I just hear there, right? Play it again.
Exactly.
Play it again. I got to hear this again, right? Because
Right on.
I don't know if it was, because you and I grew up with vinyl, it just exploded off that vinyl. That sound just engulfed you. And it was one of those rare albums where you just know exactly where you were the first time you heard it. You know what I mean? Whenever I hear Meatloaf, I go to that time at my friend's house and I heard that album. And it just seemed it was every 15-year-old boy's, dream album, really, because it was all about girls and cars and rock and roll.
That's right.
It had it all, right? It had it all. So,
yeah.
And I think you're right. I totally agree with you. I think his passion when he sang, his stage presence, you felt that song. It was Jim Steinman's words coming through Meatloaf. They were in synchronicity at that time, and that was just incredible. That was an incredible moment in music history, that's for sure.
Absolutely, Dave. And just a quick stat here for our audience. Bat Out of Hell has sold an estimated 43 million copies globally, and that includes 15 million in the United States alone, making it one of the best-selling albums of all time. And rightly so. Rightly so.
So when you the first time you heard it, I imagine you had the album yourself, and then you're sitting there looking at the cover of that album, trying to figure out what the heck it's supposed to be, right? The motorcycle, the whole thing, and listening to it. Did you ever think in your DJ days, oh, I'm going to be playing a lot of this? Like you must get when you're out on the road doing. Talk to us about that for a moment, about what it is, the Meatloaf songs that you always know you're going to have to play, and how people get so revved up for them. All revved up and no place to go, right?
You got it, Dave. You got it. Actually, before I get into that, I want to show our audience, I have the 45 of Meatloaf from 1977. 2 out of 3 ain't bad. There we go. 2 out of 3 ain't bad.
He's got a 77.
There we are. Yep, May of 1977. There's the 45. And, of course, vinyl. And this is what they call the vinyl with the donut hole in the middle.
Yep. Where did you pick that up? Where did you pick that up?
I picked that up. I'm going way back now.
Yep, here we go.
This would have been at Murray Madge. Murray Madge had the Madge Music Center on Robinson Street, right right now we're next to where the Salvation Army is, to the right of that. Murray Madge Music. I bought all my 45 records at Madge's record store, and Murray was the best. He had everything, and good price points too. Murray Madge Electric and music. Getting back to MeatLoaf, as far as the requests over the years go, Dave, I've selected 4 songs that repeatedly get requested, whether I'm doing a beautiful wedding, whether I'm doing a fundraiser dance, 50s, 60s, 70s dance, whatever. Here are the 4 top songs on my request lists done by MeatLoaf.
Okay.
And they're in no particular order. 2 Out of 3 Ain't Bad from 1978. Paradise by the Dashboard Light, 1978. Bat Out of Hell, that's 1977. Songs from the album and the CD. And from 1993, I'd Do Anything for Love. Those are the 4 most requested MeatLoaf songs. As I mentioned, the third one there, Bat Out of Hell, that's from the album or compilation CD from 1977. And songs within that first album, okay, Bat Out of Hell, that were requested. So that's quite a good list. Wouldn't you agree?
I totally agree. And I bet you, when you get back out there after all this pandemic stuff, you're going to, with him passing, you just know that the request numbers are going to be up, right? It's going to be a resurgence of MeatLoaf again, which, great, wonderful. I hope everybody wants to listen to it. And I know everybody wants to hear him one more time. That's for sure.
Right on, Dave. Yeah, I can't wait. I'm just itching to get out there again, and it will come. It will come.
Well, I mean, they'll give you a break from me, right?
A little more patient, and we should be good. Looking now, Dave, for our audience, the 1990s for MeatLoaf. After the success of MeatLoaf's touring in the 1980s, he and Steinman, they began work during December 1990 on Bat Out of Hell 2, Back to Hell. It was released in September of 1993. That was very, very successful. And in March of 1994, at the 36th Annual Grammy Awards, MeatLoaf won the Grammy Award for the Best Rock Vocal Performance Solo for the song I'd Do Anything for Love, and rightly so. That's very, very good. Now, also, just a few other tidbits here of performance. In 1994, he sang the U.S. National, the U.S. National Anthem, the Star Spangled Banner, at the Major League Baseball All-Star Game. Yeah. And he released the single Rock and Roll Dreams Come True. That's another great request song, Steinman, too, which reached number 13 in the United States that same year. So
I believe that was a Steinman song,
as you can see,
he did.
His career is highlighted not only in the recording studios, going in and recording the Bat Out of Hell albums, but also making personal appearances at humongously grand stages and events throughout the U.S.
Yeah, have you seen
England?
Have you seen that All-Star Game? I've seen that clip, and it's an amazing version that he does of the Star Spangled Banner. If you get a chance, check it out, Randy. It's kind of mind-blowing. It's that good.
Wow. Sounds good. Sounds very good. And taking a quick look at the 2000s now. In the year 2006, the album Bat Out of Hell 3, The Monster is Loose. This album features duets with Patty Russo. Here again, Patty, she's a beautiful singer. And, of course, featured duets with Patty Russo and MeatLoaf's daughter then, 2006, Pearl a Day. How good is that?
That's pretty cool.
That's incredible. On November 17th of 2003, during a performance at London's Wembley Arena, and that place is humongous, on his Couldn't Have Said It Better tour, he collapsed with what was called a Wolff-Parkinson White syndrome. What this is, Dave, it's a condition marked by an extra electrical pathway in the heart, and it causes the heart to beat more rapidly. So after he went under a small surgical procedure for this, the MeatLoaf Insurance Company would not allow him to perform any longer than 1 hour and 45 minutes for any of the shows that he did after this
I didn't know that.
procedure.
Huh.
Interesting.
Yeah, that is.
From February 20th to 22nd, 2004, during the Australian tour, MeatLoaf performed with the Melbourne Symphony Orchestra. And that was a wonderful testimony too. Here again, the UK, he's very successful in the UK. He's done well in the US. Jim Steinman, unfortunately, he had a bit of a setback. He had a heart attack and had to take it easy. And so what they did, they continued their touring, and Jim Steinman back to good form again. And then on June 27th of 2008, MeatLoaf began, this is quite an interesting tour, the Casa di Carne tour in Plymouth, England. And each of his shows there, here again, Patty Russo, teaming up with her, all of those shows were sold out. And this is in Plymouth, England. Sold out every show. Wow. How cool is that?
That is. That's really cool.
Let's take a look at the 2010s now. Hell in a Handbasket. That was released in October of 2011 for Australia and New Zealand. And for February 2012, just 10 years ago, for the rest of the world. And here again, a lot of great hits came out of that album. All of Me, Blue Sky, Mad Mad World, just to mention a few. And so after that, in 2011, MeatLoaf, they planned to release a Christmas album, and he wanted to call it Hot Holidays.
Okay.
Featuring, ready for this?
Yeah.
Featuring Garth Brooks and Reba McEntire, two superstars in country music. But the album, alas, was never released.
Oh.
Really, really unfortunate. In January of 2020, during an interview with The Mirror, MeatLoaf announced, he said, "I'm not old. I got songs for another record, and I'm reading a script." In February of 2020, Facebook posted MeatLoaf announcing his intentions to record a new album containing at least 4 or 5 tracks, and also previously recorded music from the 70s, 80s, and 90s. So this was in the works when his longtime collaborator, Jim Steinman, died on April 19th, 2021 of kidney failure.
Mm-hmm.
So what had happened in the Facebook post, November 2021, he further elaborated, and I just mentioned this, they were going back into the studios in January of 2022 to record 7 new songs for his forthcoming album, and of course that included tracks from the 70s, 80s, 90s, and 2000s. However, that never happened. As we know, MeatLoaf passed away on January the 20th this year, January the 20th, 2022. And that's basically a wrap for the career, both singing and acting careers of MeatLoaf. Truly a wonderful performer, traversing many decades. Dave, your thoughts?
It's an incredible legacy that he created with all the music over the years. Where he came from in Texas and how he sort of reinvented himself as he went along, and his passion for music and his style. Mm-hmm. His style was really unique as well. And I think I had read a quote from him that when Jim Steinman passed away, he felt like that part of him had passed away as well, because they were so close. He really felt the energy between the two was just, that was the power unit that worked so well together.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's part of it too. And I think as a young man, like I said earlier, hearing MeatLoaf, he was in the music track of my life. And I think that's part of this whole process that we're going through when someone passes away, that that's always been there for you musically. You just accept that they always will be there. And
that's right.
They do leave, but the music stays. And I think that's the important thing, is we will always have his music to listen to. And, you and I were pretty lucky because, we know Rory Dodd, a local guy who sang back out of Dover on that. And Rory's just an incredible person to chat with as well. And some of the stories that I've saw that he shared with like the CBC and just him and MeatLoaf. And you could tell there was a big friendship there as well that was important. And, my condolences to Rory. I mean, one of his close friends, both his friends, Steinman and MeatLoaf, passing away within the last year. It's got to be hard, but the great part is the music lives on. And I think that's the honor, the honor of this, is that we get to do this show, and lots of shows all over the world right now are doing this to pay tribute to the legacy of MeatLoaf, and to Jim Steinman for what he created. He was the creator.
Yes, indeed.
And with MeatLoaf's voice and Rory's voice and Foley's voice, these guys, they made a musical album that just kind of was a musical that just kind of took you on a journey, like I talked about earlier. And
that's right.
You can never relive that first moment. You and I talked about the first moment we heard it and the impact that it had, but it's kind of cool in our lifetime, Randy, that we got to be in that moment, isn't it?
Yes, indeed. Absolutely. Yeah. Wouldn't have missed it for the world.
What a ride. Yep. I got to thank you for doing this today. I know this is a hard show for both of us to do, but it was important to do it for our listeners and to pay tribute to MeatLoaf. And I know that you're such a research hound. You love to get in there and dig around and find these great stories about the musicians that we talk about each month. So thank you for doing that, Randy, and paying your respects to MeatLoaf. I greatly appreciate it.
Thanks very much, Dave. I really enjoyed doing the tribute today to MeatLoaf. It's been a slice. Thank you so much.
And I hope someday we can entice Rory to come on, and maybe when the healing process is over, maybe he'll come out and share some stories with us too at some point. It'd be great to chat with him.
That would be fantastic. Oh, yes, that would be a show and a half right there.
Take care, Randy. Thanks for doing this, and get ready for the Irish Rovers. That's our March show, folks. That'll be coming up.
Hey, sounds great, Dave. Oh, the stoving, the really savings of the green. Yes. I got to practice that a bit. Thanks, Dave. It's been a slice. We'll talk soon. Stay well.
Randy. Take care.